If you break the law, you get thrown in jail. In this case, this is a self-imposed prison. I remember a seminar my mentor, the late Dr. Fred Hatfield, and I did in Iwakuni, Japan, and he just screamed, if you break the law, you get thrown in jail, at some young powerlifter. And what we're talking about here is the 7 Granddaddy Laws that Dr. Fred Hatfield categorized himself, and what they are is a way to measure an effective training program. So if you want to know how a training program stacks up, is it effective, you can look at these 7 laws, and they're like natural laws. They just are. So it's not going to be, you know, good, bad, in between. It's just stack a training program against these laws. If it stacks up, you know, to all 7, it's a good training program. If it stacks up against, you know, the more the better. So 6 is better than 5, 5 is better than 4, you know, 1 or 2 is not good. So the first one is the principle of individual differences. So everyone has a genetic blueprint, different abilities, bodies, body strengths, weaknesses, and will respond differently to a different training program. So just how like your hip structure can, you know, will dictate a lot of your squatting form. Okay, so the same thing would, you know, true a lot of different. So how fast to recover, your injury history, psychological makeup, what you do for work, how you change over time. Because if you've built your work capacity over the last couple of years, you recover a lot better. You're a different lifter than you were a couple of years ago. So some people respond well to high frequency, low frequency, medium frequency, you know, sub-maximal weights, training heavier, how often they reload, things like that. Bottom line is everybody's different, and if it, you know, so the principle of individual differences is just stating that no two people, or you know, no one's going to respond exactly to the same you know, training program, training system, or whatever. So you got to keep that in mind. Things have to be individualized. Okay, next, the overcompensation principle. Okay, that says callus is built on your hands as an adaptive response to friction, and Mother Nature compensates from weight training stress by building bigger and stronger muscles. So this takes place so you can handle, you know, with training wise, you can handle more stress, you know, in the future. So it directly ties, and all these are somewhat interrelated, but directly ties into the next one we're going to talk about, which is the overload principle. Okay, and that is to gain size or strength, you must strengthen your muscles beyond what they're accustomed to. So the great example of this is Milo of Croton. So we've already talked a little bit about Milo, but what he did is, legend has it, we're not here to say if it's true, false, somewhat true, somewhat false. Just listen to this as it is truth for what we're trying to say here. Milo, every single day, from he had a baby calf, and he picked that calf up every day until it became a full-grown ox. By the time it was fully grown, he was the strongest man in the world, and he'd won, you know, 32 wrestling. It was the most revered wrestler of antiquity. But that's what it is, progressive overload, you know, doing more each time. So the most obvious way to do that is by just adding more weight to the bar, you know. But as we've talked about before, you know, 5 times 52 is 260 pounds. So, you know, if you're benching a 45-pound bar now, that means in 3 years you'd be doing over 800 pounds, 825 pounds. Not very likely. So you're gonna have to look at other ways to do it. You know, are you gonna do, you know, more, increase your training density, increase your training frequency, you know, shorter rest breaks, you know, extra rep, you know, 6 reps becomes 7, things like that, outside of just adding weight to the bar. But you're gonna have to overload. Even programs you don't see like a progressive overload, more like your West Side Barbell Club, you know, Conchi type of stuff, you might go back, okay, hey, I squatted 500 on a 12-inch box with a safety bar. Okay, next time you come in your rotation to that, you're gonna have to beat that PR. That's the whole point of max effort. You're gonna beat what you previously did. So even there is some sort of progressive overload there. So you have to overload if you're gonna make gains. The SAID principle. This acronym stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands. This means the muscles and body will respond in a highly specific manner to the training demands placed on it. So if your goal is to be explosive, you best train explosive. If your goal is to build, you know, powerlifting limit strength, then you're going to have to train heavy in the power lifts. Okay, and you're going to have to build the supporting musculature that supports those lifts. So your body will respond to the training stress you impose on it. Choose wisely. The use-disuse principle. So this comes down to that old adage, use it or lose it. Means that your muscles hypertrophy and strengthen with use, and atrophy and weaken with disuse. Okay, so that old thing your grandma used to say about use it or lose it is exactly what we're talking about here. So displaying strength in the powerlifts, that's a skill. Okay, if you stop training the powerlifts that way, you're going to lose that skill. If you're training for muscle hypertrophy and you stop training regularly for that, you're going to lose that muscle hypertrophy. So the good news is once you've developed skills in the powerlifting, even after like a long hiatus, that neurological base you've built is going to be kind of easy. You know, it's not as easy as I've rode a bike in 20 years, hop on a bike and ride it again, but it's sort of along the lines of that. So you're going to have to keep using these skills if you want to develop them. Okay, next is the specificity principle. It's very similar to the said principle we already discussed, but you're going to get stronger in the powerlifts by doing the big three, as opposed, you know, to doing leg presses, hammer strength inclines, Smith machine deadlifts, or anything else somewhat similar. Okay, neuromuscular adaptation will occur over time as an adaptation to repetitively grooving a specific movement pattern. So when Pavel talks about greasing the groove, what he's essentially talking about is a specificity principle. So you're going to get better at that skill by performing that lift. You know, the way to get to Carnegie Hall is practice, 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 as we said many times. So this is not at the expense of assistance work. So, you know, you might have to build up your bench press. You might have to directly target your triceps with an isolation exercise, which is all fine and dandy. But you know, the bottom line is the greatest neurological benefits are going to be derived from actually bench pressing for the bench press. The GAS principle. So this acronym stands for General Adaptation Syndrome. The GAS is comprised of 3 stages. Okay, so first is the alarm stage, caused by the application of intense training stress, the overload principle. Next is the resistance stage. This is when your muscles adapt in order to resist stressful weights more efficiently. You know, the overcompensation, said, DISUSE principles. And finally, the exhaustion stage, where if you kept going, you're going to overtrain really badly. And so what this means, bottom line in layman's terms, you can't just keep pushing. Eventually, if you're going hard, intense, all the time, you're going to have to back off, either with like an active recovery, reload type of week, or actually, you know, a break of some sort. And this is kind of what we talk about another time, is kind of led way into the, you know, the fitness fatigue model, which doesn't replace GAS, but it further expands on it. So these are the laws. So if you have any questions about a training program, put it against these 7 Granddaddy laws and see where it stacks up to you, to strength. And thank you, Dr. Fred Hatfield, for teaching me the 7 Granddaddy laws.